This album's artwork is quite memorable, as we can see. Through this piece of art, we discovered that hell is not a pit of fire, a place carved into rock to punish the souls of the damned until they become nothing but ash. But instead, hell is an empty frozen wasteland, a lonely place you will be lost in for eternity. And that's precisely what the artwork for Paradise Belongs to You represents. We see this dead deer covered by snow. Tree branches sneak into the image from the corners. We know this is a dead place, with naked dead trees. And just like this poor animal, you will freeze here. And you will be completely alone in this endless wasteland. In this video, I will talk about every single album by the band Saturnus, so you know what to expect. What I said about the artwork is the first impression I got out of this album released by the band Saturnus. I will pronounce this band's name as Saturnus because I prefer how that sounds more than how Saturnus sounds. That's basically the entire thought process behind it. So I suggest you get used to that, alright? Then let's talk about this Danish band, formed in 1991 by vocalist Thomas A.G. Jensen and bassist Brian Hansen. The band firstly had a different name and they planned on making death metal, but by 1993 they already changed their name to Saturnus and their focus shifted on to death doom instead, bringing in synthesizers into the band's sound. Their debut, Paradise Belongs to You, was released on January 16, 1997. And in it, besides Thomas and Brian, we also get other band members and guitarist Kim Larsen, keyboardist Anders Roe Nielsen, and drummer Jasper Saltoft. Talking very specifically about Paradise, for a long time I thought only the first half of the album was good, ending on the song The Fall of Nakiel. But in more recent times, my opinion has changed, and now I find the album quite consistent from beginning to end, so it is a banger of an album. Paradise Belongs to You could be perceived as a concept album, although as far as I have read on the internet, the band itself doesn't officially consider it to be one. Anyway, I say that you could perceive it in that way because we can find how the overall themes and the whole story being told here can be seen as a sequential story following a man who lost his faith, went on a pilgrimage, and found his own pagan paradise. So starting here, I will analyze every single song from this album. Starting with the title track, Paradise Belongs to You. It narrates how once you found yourself up there in the clouds, filled with the grace of God and the angels, but you've fallen since then, and now you find yourself in a cold wasteland. Here, as we can see represented in this album's artwork, there is only death to be found. But strangely, somehow, at the same time that there is only coldness and death here, you feel at peace. The great curtains that blinded your view, behind which you hid yourself for so long, have now been opened to never close again. You discovered your own paradise, as cold and as harsh as it may be. The first song is a summary of everything that happens in the next few songs, as if it were a summarized introduction to everything that happens in this album. Each following song tells the story in more detail. Christ's Goodbye is the first song beyond the introduction. Here, once a fervorous religious man, you're now losing your faith. God is dead. The world does not look the same. Once you've realized that God was dead, you lost your innocence like a child faced with the harsh reality of life. As We Dance the Paths of Fire and Solace is the next song on this album, and it is an instrumental that connects the previous song, The Loss of Faith, into the next one, which is about the spiritual journey you started with the goal of finding the truth. Pilgrimage of Sorrow is the title of that song. You are trying to find peace in a lonely pilgrimage. God seems not to be up on the sky. That God, the one distorted by dogma and by the church, has died a long time ago. And now you're able to see how the true God is down here, somewhere, but at the same time, everywhere, permeating everything. The Fall of Nakiel is the next song, the most unique song out of Saturnus' entire discography, must I say. And it follows up the story. After your loss of faith and loss of hope, you went on this spiritual pilgrimage. You thought you could regain your faith, but all you ended up finding here was just more fallen angels and something else entirely, something more mysterious, something more pagan. Astral Dawn and I Love Thee are the next two songs. Finding your true self and finding joy in this pagan forest you're in. The old idols of man have been shattered before your eyes. Now you're on the brink of discovering your true destiny, your true self. You're almost able to see beyond the surface of this physical world. You start to realize that the spiritual realm is not separate from the physical one, but instead, you now see how they are interconnected. You're lost in this pagan forest. You're dancing and playing around these woods like a pagan god. The Underworld is the next song, and it is about finding yourself in paradise. Paradise is this cold pagan forest you've danced and played and rejoiced for so long, you forgot how much time has passed. You've completed your rites of passage. You danced around the bonfire with your kin, and now your spirit is finally at peace, finally able to rest. The pilgrimage that started eons ago has brought you here. This place is both your beginning and your end. Here you discover that true gods do carry horns, contrary to what you've been taught your entire life. Lament for this treacherous world is the instrumental which closes the album, and as the song fades away into silence, this world is fading away as you're becoming one with the eternal nothingness, as you're freezing like the deer from this album's artwork. Martyre is the band's sophomore, and it was the first gothic doom metal album I ever listened to. So basically, every single gothic metal and doom metal album I listen to is always compared to this one. That's how good it is, and that's how much it marked me. Martyre was released on January 10th, 2000. Here the band's lineup was kept almost the same, only with the inclusion of Peter Poulsen as a second guitarist. While Paradise was a more pagan album, Martyre is far more gothic, and depending on the day, well, I consider this one to be the band's greatest achievement. The artwork contains a painting titled The Young Martyr and was created by the French painter Paul de la Roche. It represents no specific story nor tale, but instead it depicts the sacrifice of a young Christian woman in the river called Tiber back when Christians were still being persecuted by the Romans. Knowing the event being depicted in the artwork, it goes along very well with the themes present in this album: persecution and sacrifice. The first song is titled 7, and it is sung in Latin, befittingly. It is about the creation of the world, which is in truth a prison built in 7 stages, 7 levels, and of which only one of them, the 7th one, has the presence of light and could be somehow perceived as the level where freedom can be found. Who knows what god created this world? Maybe a Roman god or a Christian one? Inflame Thy Heart truly starts the album, and it is about a pagan ritual. You are being initiated. This is the night of the raven. You must raise thy wand, thy dagger, and raise thy cup. Praise and chant, inflame thy heart, and you will be purified. It goes hand in hand with the themes present in the first album, but as far as the pagan presence in Saturnus music goes, it pretty much starts to leave the spotlight here. For the next songs and albums become much less focused on religion and instead follow a more personally relatable direction. Empty-Handed, for example, is the next song, and it is about you being thrown into the darkness and falling empty-handed. The gold you had in your hands slipped away from in between your fingers. All the precious things you had are now gone. Noir is next, and it follows the thematic about falling to despair, to hopelessness. You seek to change, to seize all pain, but instead, your dreams all fade away and become black. You had no choice but to move past it all. You walked away. You left those broken dreams behind, and you embraced the darkness of your spirit. A poem written in moonlight is about being awake late at night. You can't go to sleep, but in this lonely hour, new wisdom comes to you, and you start seeing things differently. Let's just hope that by morning, this new wisdom won't go away. Softly on the path you fade follows the melancholic sound presented in the previous songs. It is about becoming like an animal, maybe a wolf, or in my case, an owl. You step deeper into the darkness. You can't help yourself but venture into the depths of the pagan forest you discovered while on your pilgrimage of sorrow. Thou Art Free is about realizing your insignificance in the face of the ancient esoteric knowledge we lost a long time ago. All you can do is watch the dark forest humanity came from, dream about the wisdom we once had when we lived there, and then follow the raven with your eyes as it flies away in true freedom, freedom humanity forgot a long time ago. Drown My Sorrow is about how, no matter how hot the fires rage on, you still bleed cold. No matter how good things are, you will still fall back into sorrow. There is no option for you but to drown in sorrow. Lost My Way, Lost in Memoriam, and Does My Heart Weepeth for Thee are the next 3 songs in this album. They're about sorrow, they're about getting stuck back on that dark corner, and they're about losing someone you held dearly close to your heart. Things have gone so wrong in your life, all you have now is sorrow. It could all end if just your life were to cease, but somehow you're still here, unable to die. You lost someone you loved so much. The loss of that person was the most tragic thing you ever experienced. Their love could never be replaced by anything. The album ends with In Your Shining Eyes, and it is about innocence and hope. These 2 things are the shine on people's eyes, and once they fade away, it is as if one's spirit is stripped away from that person. Maybe it happened to you, or maybe you saw it happen to someone you cared about. Veronika Decides to Die came out on May 3rd, 2006, and this album is, by far, the most sorrowful and depressing album ever made by Saturnus. Now, as I said before with Martyre, Veronika Decides to Die is also an album that, depending on the day, I might consider it to be the best album by Saturnus. It's either one of these 2, they're both masterpieces. This album, as its title suggests, is indeed inspired by Paulo Coelho's book of the same title, which is basically a story about a woman called Veronika who decides to end her own life but ends up failing and waking up in a mental asylum. The album's artwork pretty much represents the book quite well, if you ask me. Fun fact, for you who's watching this, is that I only read that book because of this album, and I read that book in English. Only as I was reading the book I realized that its author was Brazilian, as I also am. Well, that was quite something I totally wasn't expecting back then. And also, while we're on the topic of Saturnus and Brazil, why is this band so popular in Brazil? Well, since their first ever show in Brazil will actually only happen just this year, I guess it is precisely because of this album that the band is so popular here. They even released a cover album of their own songs by different Brazilian artists on Spotify, so look at that. You can find on my channel a complete video telling the story of the book Veronika Decides to Die, in case you're interested, and I also mentioned both the book and the album briefly on my previous video about the game Cry of Fear, so check that one out as well. But without further ado, let's just talk about the album already. This time, the lineup changed slightly for Veronika Decides to Die. Thomas, Anders and Peter remained on vocals, keyboards and guitars respectively. But Thijs Pedersen, Lennart Jacobsen and Nikolai Borg entered the band on guitars, bass and drums, also respectively. Being the band's most depressing album, we can find how that is very well reflected on all the songs present here. This album is not about the events of the book, but instead it takes the book's themes and transforms them into scattered tales of sorrow and loneliness, as we can see already with the first track, which is titled I Long. I Long is such a great introduction to this release, for it is about, as the title suggests, longing for something good to come and happen to you. And as the lyrics hint at us, it seems that the thing you seek the most is to discover true love. Something you've been unfortunately unable to find so far. You instead are forced to dream about those things you wish most, dreams of which always end up becoming nightmares, and as they become nightmares, you're forced to wake up to the sad reality you find yourself in. Pretend is the second song, and similarly to the first, it talks about love. In this case, you lost someone you loved. That person could have died tragically, but also you could interpret the song as the person still being alive. The thing is that he or she just doesn't care for you anymore. You're now just part of their past, an unwanted memory that will eventually be forgotten. Still, you cannot move on, you still miss them. And so you pretend and daydream that they still love you and that they are still with you. You can pretend that you two can still give one more passionate kiss before it all fades away. Descending and Rain Wash Me are the next two songs. They're about descending deeper into the lonely darkness of depression. You wish you could move on, be somewhere else, be somewhere better, but you cannot. All the nights you stayed awake, unable to sleep, in those dark hours, your thoughts and anxieties control you. All those other times you stayed under the rain, it cleaned you, it purified you. The rain washed away your nightmares, your sad memories, your demons, your solitude, but even still, the pain always comes back. Just today, as of the writing of the script, I went out and when it was time for me to go back home, it was raining. I didn't have an umbrella with me, so I just decided to take in that rain and walk home. As I did that, I listened to Rain Wash Me on my earphones, and must I tell you, what an experience that was. So very perfect the occasion was, and so very memorable. But well, let's move on. I'm Alone is the next track, and it is my favorite song from this album and maybe even from Saturnus Discography as a whole. This song talks about how you stayed alone for such a long time during your spirit's pilgrimage, your journey into the wilderness, that you no longer know how to live with other people. That way you became free to such a point that it almost seemed as if you could just fly away. Empty your mind from your problems. Reap the loneliness you've sown. And in those black fields you will die all alone. That's not a negative thing, for once you realize that all you need is already there, you become able to die in peace. Embraced by darkness and to the dreams come after. They talk about the worst, darkest, deepest and evilest aspects of yourself being turned into your strength. Embrace yourself. Turn your own darkness and misery into a companion that gives you the power to push forward. Still even, you should let in a little sunshine to befall your world of dreams. Let this little light push away the loneliness and sadness. Let the warm winds of summer bring you some much deserved joy and happiness. For these little things are better appreciated by those who experienced the deepest depths of sorrow. Murky Waters is the closing track of the album. In it, your perspective of the world is foggy as if you were lost in a dense mist. It is as if you were under a swamp or the murky waters of a bogland. You're trapped under those waters and you cannot see what's on the surface. You can only see the filth accumulated in the water. It is always the sadness, always your crippled heart, and the endless lonely nights that blind your view the most. You're unable to see the good in life. You're unable to battle those monsters. You're unable to glance back into the abyss. Saturn in Ascension was released on November 30th, 2021, and in this album we had major lineup changes for the band. Brian Hansen and Thomas Nilsson stayed on bass and vocals, but Henrik Glass entered the band on drums and Rune Ciasny on guitars, keyboards, and also did the orchestration for this release. For a long time I severely underrated this album and gave it no attention at all. But more recently, I listened to it more times and with each one, this album has grown in me. Now I think that is also a great album. It is interesting that each Saturnus album has something unique about it. Paradise is the most pagan, Martyre is the most gothic, Veronika is the most depressing, and now Saturn in Ascension ends up being the most atmospheric work by the band. The most Death Doom album they ever released. And with that, we will talk about the artwork, which has this huge skull up on the sky, descending here on this red evil forest. It seems to be a graveyard of some sorts, for there are hands reaching out from the ground, as if the dead were rising. The trees are dead, and maybe the name Saturn mentioned in the title is not about the planet, but maybe an ancient forgotten god. One that could, maybe, resurrect the dead? And with that, we have the first song from the album, titled Litany of Rain. This song is about meeting the end of your life. You're too old now. You ended up gathering nothing but emptiness throughout your life. You are nothing but a lonely, strange man of whom nobody loves or remembers. It won't take long for your weak flame to just fade away. Wind Torn and Lonely Passage are the next songs. Just as how the wind and the elements slowly tear apart a lonely tree and lead it to its decay, time and sorrow will do the same for you. Your whispers have been carried by the wind. Your memory has been as well. And both of them will eventually be forgotten by time and entropy. The darkness still hunts you down. You try to escape. Little are the opportunities you have to rest, and when you can, there is little time for that. Is it really worth it for you to keep on running? You find yourself lost in a forest, led there by this never-ending hunt. There, amongst the stones, bushes, and trees, with renewed pagan strength, you finally decide it is time for you to face your demons and fight them. A father's providence and morning sun come next. They are about wishing and praying for a better world without ghosts nor sins, about fervorously fighting for your fate. But you cannot live a life just of dreams, prayers and expectations. You need to raise arms if you want justice to be done. You cannot forget what has come before, the past failures. Fate cannot change, and what was done in the past matters no more. All you can do is accept your mourning fate. Call of the Raven Moon is next, and it talks about how it doesn't matter who you are or what you do. The world always remains the same. It is as if you didn't matter at all. All you need is to find a place where you can feel at home, feel relaxed, a place to call yours. Any path you try to take to find a way out of this place always ends up nowhere. No matter how much you try to do anything different, it has no result. A shattered, broken path. The ruins of what once were are no more. You lost someone you loved. That person was the sun that kept you warm. But you couldn't save them, so now you're forced to always remain alone. Forest of Insomnia is about how life is a waking nightmare. Only once you get lost in the Forest of Insomnia, you may find a way out of those nightmares. There you will be forever lost, for there are no paths out of it, no way to leave, no light to illuminate your stay. only the darkness underneath the trees. And once you're in that forest, the only way you can go is deeper, into the abyss. Between is the last song, and it is about how you always spend your winters alone. You're used to this isolation under the cold sky. Every year has always been the same, and you know how the next one will be as well. Like a great thinker alone in the mountains, like a superior man hidden inside a cave, you spend your time as a lone hermit, a lone philosopher. The Storm Within came out as a complete surprise, because, well, at that point I wasn't expecting the band to make new music, and suddenly, there we were. This album was released on June 16th, 2023. Man, it's been that long. It still feels like it was yesterday when this album came out. That's crazy. But well, the current lineup of the band consists of Brian on bass, Thomas on vocals, and Henrik on drums. With them, new members joined in Mika Fiborn on keyboards and piano, Indy Rehal Sagu on lead guitars, and Julio Fernandez on rhythm guitars. As I pointed out before, every single Saturnus album is unique, for they all have some characteristic that makes them stand out in comparison to the rest. In case of The Storm Within, I feel like this has been, to date, the band's most optimistic work ever made. Even though the songs keep that sorrowful thematic and sound, things here seem much brighter. Those problems you battled with in the past have all been solved, and the ones that remained are on their way to be as well. It's like a breath of fresh air. You're no longer in the depths. Instead, you've reached the surface. The first song is the title track, The Storm Within, and it talks about how you cannot change the mistakes of your past. Instead, you need to accept them and face your problems. If you want to escape or to ignore your inner demons, you will only fall deeper in sorrow. The storm within is growing bigger. You need to face it from the innermost depths of your spirit. Embrace the darkness with all you can. Fight with all your might and make your way into the surface, until the sky becomes blue again and the storm has dissipated. The next song is Chasing Ghosts, and it talks about when you falsely believe that you're into something, that you might have another chance at undoing a mistake you committed long ago, until you eventually discover that you've been chasing ghosts all along. The only thing here for you is your own shadow, a dead end. The Calling is the next song, and here we go back to your life's worst mistakes. You kept on doing that, but now you need to seek something bigger, something to finally make a change, something meaningful. But for you to get there, you need to first journey through deep dark caves and obscure valleys. Only by facing the abyss, you'll be able to find your calling. The next two songs are Eventide and Closing the Circle, and they're about being lost in the middle of the sea on a boat. You're unable to go anywhere, and the storm is only growing. Whenever you meet someone you think is the right person for you, and whenever you believe that you were finally able to find love, the passion you discovered doesn't take long to completely fade away. That is what happens every time. You're always alone, finding your way back home. Many things will be left undone, and you know you are guilty for all the failures you've accumulated in your life. Breathe New Life comes next, and it talks about how you went through the darkest journey you've ever had in your life. But now you can go home and cease your fear of failure and betrayal. You can go home and build a new life full of hope, for you have breathed in new life, new expectations, and an unknown strength you didn't know you had. Truth is the last song of the album, and it talks about how there will be a moment you feel that everything seems hopeless and that there's no way things will get better. Close your eyes and breathe calmly. It doesn't matter, for even when you want to speak the truth, nothing comes out the way you intended to be. Nobody understands you, and nobody will ever understand you. Maybe solitude is the only choice you have, but one thing will remain true until the very end. The fact that only a person knows his own true sorrow and his own true pain. Nobody else will ever understand that.